And we are live. Here we go. Hi, everyone. We're here. Myself, Suzaida, your host of Elevate Your Energy Frequency. I'm here with our co-hosts, Erin and Shanae.
Hi, everyone. So good to see everyone. And I know everyone's having just the happiest holidays. So excited to be here.
Yeah.
Me too. Hi, everyone.
And we have a very, very special guest with us today. Her name is Elizabeth Wood. Elizabeth Wood. Can you guys hear me okay? I feel like there's an echo.
There's an echo. There's a little bit of an echo. Let me see.
Let's see.
You sound good to me.
Okay, let me just make one adjustment and see if that does anything. Hold on. Zoom. No, it doesn't. Okay. Okay. Does that help? And better? That's really weird. Okay. I'm going to keep going.
Okay. I'll keep going.
Sorry, you guys. We're working through some technical stuff. Okay, let's start over. We would like to welcome our very, very special guest. Her name is Elizabeth Wood. Elizabeth is an Advanced Seer, and she has a master's in Applied Anthropology. And one of the things we find incredibly fascinating about Elizabeth is she has this, her work combines galactic and quantum anthropology with trauma healing and futurism. So let me say that again. Her work combines galactic and quantum anthropology combined with trauma healing and futurism. And so she has this beautiful, very real, very relatable way of bridging anthropological theory with quantum physics and ancient and modern medicine and sciences. And she also has had a lifelong ability to be able to access all of the dimensions. And her work, her psychic work, and her theoretical work has helped people all over the world from what, in a way that I would like to describe as embodying the truth of who they really are. So welcome, Elizabeth.
Oh, it's wonderful to be with you. I love the powerful trio that you have, and it creates such a great container for us to dig in.
Absolutely. The first thing I'd like to ask you, and I think this is a really great start, can you tell us what it means to be an advanced seer and how you stumbled onto that title or label or role?
That's a good question. So I've always been psychic, and everyone is. Most people don't think that they are psychic, but they really are. It's a natural part of what the human brain is capable of, and the brain itself is picking up so much information beyond just the five senses. So we've discovered this quite well, and the real actual quality term for it would be a psychic capability that human beings have. Well, when someone has that in their whole life and they have had it since they were born, we might say they have a talent for that. So I'm also really great at playing the piano too. So I'm a pianist. And, you start out with that. And for me, as many gifts like that of that caliber, it felt more like torture than it did as a gift or talent. And so I dug into science and wanted to know, are there other people like me? Is there anybody else who has these experiences that I do? Because it's 24/7 and I can't turn it off. And my family was very worried about me, even though it was handy to have a psychic kid around. And so I dug in. I really wanted to know, is there a scientific way to view all of this? And I understood it much better by getting an anthropological degree. But it took me many, many years of schooling to finally be okay with being me. And then I met a mystic after master's school who basically looked at me and said, "You are really psychic." And I'm like, well, I I don't know how I feel about that word. You know, it sounds like somebody looking into a crystal ball reading tarot cards. And she's like, no, that's not what it means. And she's like, what are you capable of doing? So I start naming some things off, and she says, oh, no, that's really rude. Some of the things that I said I could do. And I'm like, wow, this person knows the rules of this whole realm that I have no idea what the rules are. So she said, you know, being psychic, that's the same as being able to be an empath or be a warrior or be a healer. It's a skill set. And every skill set has different layers to it in that you can advance your skill sets. So there's a very, you know, an advanced version of being an empath, and there's the most advanced version of being an empath. Well, the same is for being a psychic. And the mid version level of psychichood would be a seer. And that's a term that's very ancient, someone who could see beyond just the first layers of reality that everyone normally is interacting with. And then there's the oracle. And the oracle is someone who has moved all of their ego and all of their trauma out of the way so fully that they become a perfect mirror. And I'm basically right there, and I still have a lot of personality, and I still have a lot of triggers that I work with in my own trauma. But at that point now, there's nothing I can't see. I was trying to describe it to my husband today, actually, and he's like, I really don't get it. And I'm like, look, I'm in the bedroom here, and it looks like an ordinary bedroom, but not to me. I can see all the layers of how this whole building was created by whom and what those trajectories were like and how they met in order to create this entire house. I could look at a poster and tell you all about who made it, who designed it, what it was like. And when you look at a human being, it's like the most fabulous book you've ever read. Each human is like the most magnificent story that gets to be seen without judgment if you're doing it right. So that's what a seer is.
Oh my gosh, that's so powerful.
Wow.
Elizabeth, what came to my mind? I just want to chime in here. You were talking about losing personality or connecting with your personality. Could you go a little bit more into that? Like that really popped out at me. Like
Sure.
in terms of like being a seer, and we're talking about becoming more of our authentic selves. So how was that process for you? I'm really curious.
The way I envision or see personality is that personality can either be defined by your trauma and your ego, or it can be defined by your soul's essence. And the soul's essence, let me define that for you because it's very specific. The human is made of light, and everything's made of light. It all comes from a source field, which is a measurable mathematical field. This source field is very still, and the individuation of a person's experience or their consciousness, that comes from source. So if you can kind of imagine a sun with a whole bunch of beams of light coming off of it, right?
Yeah.
Everything is still at the center of that in this universe, as the source field basically is the cultivating place where all consciousness comes from, and everything is conscious. Everything is light. Light, consciousness, and information are all the same. You are a very specific wavelength of light. And the minute that you were individuated from that source field, that's what your essence is. It's sort of like the very first note that came in to define your song. And that song may be many billions of years old and have had many trajectories, or maybe it was the very first time you decided to be conscious, and here you are, and this is your first life. That's happened too. It might be your first and last. That occurs. And so when we say someone's an old soul, that's what we mean. But that is what the essence is. So can your personality be defined by your essence? It can. And if it's more defined by your ego or your trauma, and trauma is that same consciousness under pressure, right? An ego is trauma under pressure. Because trauma under pressure helps you to build up enough ego structure to help you navigate, but it's so heavy. It's so heavy and it takes a lot of effort to carry that around and not being able to then function from your essence. So if you got your attention on your trauma, your ego, and your personality, you're going to try to unweave your personality from that structure and let it be really defined by your essence instead. And that's what I like to teach people to do.
Powerful.
That's very powerful. In that case, talking about trauma under pressure and that your ego is trauma under pressure, can you go into that a little bit more, Elizabeth? Because I think there's so many different ways that we can interpret, what ego really means and how it serves us or how it doesn't serve us. So I would love to be able to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, and first we want to take a non-judgment perspective because everyone has ego. It's incredibly unusual for someone to remove all ego. There's even ego deep at the very base levels of your existence that help you navigate reality so you don't get hit by a car when you cross the street. That's technically ego. Mm-hmm. And we have learned it. If ego's still trauma under pressure, well, that one time when you were a toddler and you tried to run out in the street and your mom freaked out and started screaming at you, well, that might have traumatized you, but in a good way to keep you from getting hit by a car, right? So there's nothing wrong with ego and there's nothing wrong with trauma. That's a pretty radical statement because it's something that you're learning from. But if you can unwrap the trauma quickly, if you have the tools to be able to notice it, understand it, unwrap it, then it doesn't have to linger as a heavy structure in what? In your DNA. Your DNA has all that memory. It's the temple of light. And this DNA has a lot of memory. It's got memory mostly not from you, but from all your ancestors. We call it epigenetic memory. And epigenetic memory is defined by many, many hundreds of thousands of experiences before you. So we are in these bodies, we enter into these bodies as a consciousness that is other dimensional. And that consciousness, once it enters in, you're in the body and you're hanging out, and no wonder you forget who you are. You're surrounded in trash bags already. It's like being in a house and you wake up in a room full of trash bags and you don't know where you are and you don't know how to navigate. And so you start building up your own trash bags. And if you're searching for that realization, and everyone has this moment of, this can't be it. There's much more than this.
Yeah.
There's more than this. That's the soul and its deep, powerful ability to give you that opportunity to search out what is this really? And that constant question, what is this? Who am I? Is going to drive most people. And when you get that chance, then you attract a lot more tools to help you navigate those trash bags. And they're treasure. Trauma is treasure. Triggers are treasure. Reactions are rubies. And they are helping you to learn. You've drawn them in. You've picked this exact life in order to learn an immense amount of information as a conscious being that is far, far beyond this body. The other cool part is that DNA, because it maintains memory, it also feeds out. It's a transmitter. You have an electromagnetic field that your heart is literally creating all the time, and it's huge. You can measure it about 6 feet in diameter around your whole body. But the fact is your field is much larger than that. It can actually go all the way to the edge of the universe if you really work with that field. And that's because DNA gives you an opportunity to actually be in and navigate all dimensions at once. Trauma trash bags, actually, an ego structure keeps you from having access to what's already there. We don't need to activate anybody. You need to actively move stuff out of the way so you get access to the whole house. And when you have access to the house, that light from your soul starts pouring in, and you begin to feel it and see it and know it, and you begin to actually embody it. And that light then, it takes over, because that was the energy that said, there's much more than these trash bags around here. I might not remember exactly. You move them out of the way, you end up remembering everything. Amen. You can remember everything. And remembrance is something that's an outcome. It's not something you have to work at. You need to actively discover what's in those trash bags and merge with those frequencies that are so difficult, so they don't have power over you anymore and they don't show up again and again. That's why old-fashioned protection or clearing doesn't work. It just doesn't. Because you might clear something, it's going to come back because it's trying to show you something that's deep inside of you that might not even be yours. It transmits energy out into the rest of the field. And that field that I just described, it's so big. It is the universe. Well, it's connecting to all the other fields. It informs the rest of humanity, whether you share what you've discovered or not. Yeah. So that's the precious part about being human, and why that self-work is so key to not just helping you, but helping change the whole planet. It's what is key.
Now, one of the questions I have, Elizabeth, and follow up to this, is how do our thoughts affect not just our reality, but also the collective reality? You know, talking about our energies and how that field can project all the way out to the end of the universe if we wanted to. So I feel like there's you hear that our thoughts help to create, impact all the way out. Yes. So
it's powerful. Let me give you some examples. I'm married and I have 3 children, and my husband is an extremely powerful person. And because I'm so sensitive, I can feel and see and hear his thoughts. And it's kind of like living in 2 glass houses. I'm in a glass house, he's in a glass house, because he can feel me react to it too. And so we've learned to navigate this realization of, well, that's how powerful our thoughts really are, that I don't have to say a thing, and I don't even have to look like I'm reacting. He can feel it. Why? Well, there's 2 layers to thoughts, and what we're talking about is really the brain mind. And you have 3 brains, the brain, the heart, and the gut. These are actual real brains with neurons and everything. And the brain mind is going to create a huge amount of thoughts all day long. It's kind of its job, but it has 2 sets of thoughts. It has what's called a first attention, which is the one that you tend to have more control over, but it's also the one where that little voice in your head comes in regularly and says, you're failing, or you're the most beautiful person in the room, or whatever. We might call that the voice of your traumatized selves, the voice of your ego, and the voice of so much of who you are. And yet you can totally look at each of those thoughts and say, hang on a second, is that really true, what you're saying? And who are you anyway? Well, they're coming from the subconscious, the second layer of your thoughts. And the subconscious is like the basement. And the basement's full to the brim of all kinds of random things. There's fluffy pink hamsters down there, and there's crazy violent stuff, and there's dark and light and everything in between, and there's no order, and there's lots of duplicates. Deep in there are a lot of your traumatized selves who are just begging for attention. So if you want to have a still mind, where your thoughts are fully in control of your soul, that specific light that is you, which is possible. I didn't believe it was possible because I had such a traumatized mind. I had terrible PTSD and was told by 14 different therapists that no one could help me, that I was just screwed. And I said, no, I don't believe it. They want to put me on medication. I'm like, no way, my brain's not wired like a normal person. There's no way I'm going to go on meds. And I said, no, I've got to figure this out. Because if I can do it, then other people can do it.
Mm.
So here's the first tool I'd like to share today to be able to have that is to bow to these parts of you, these little voices that come in and they say these crazy things. Bow to them, thank them. Gratitude puts you at an objective place. It gives you back your witness state, the one that is the soul. And you can bow to it and say, thank you for trying to help me. I really appreciate that. And I understand that this is what you are wanting me to see right now in this moment. I have a different plan because I am the soul in charge. And then you take a big, deep breath because that tells the whole nervous system that this new change is okay. And then you can dig in and you can say, all right, who are you? And so here's a good example. I had horrible chicken pox when I was a little kid, and then I had horrible cystic acne, and my face looked like hamburger. And it was so bad that I'd walk in the kitchen in the morning when I was a teenager, and my dad would start crying. That's how bad it was. And so I really hated myself. I had built up quite a bit of worthlessness and then built up a huge amount of arrogance to balance it out over years of college. But at that time, the truth is that it was creating a traumatized version of me. And she was built upon the traumatized little kid who had chicken pox and missed her ballet recital. So they were built on each other, but they actually were individuals. They needed help. And so as I got older, I would get ready for something like this, and I'd hear this voice saying how ugly I was. And I'm like, who are you? Let's talk. So I bow to them and thank them because they're trying to help me. They're trying to help me because that's part of my ego who's built up so much trauma that it's saying, no, you're not pretty enough. You can't navigate this the way that you think you can. It's not true, but it was giving me the information I needed to actually go and find those traumatized selves. So then you can have a deep conversation with the teenager and the little kid you, and you give them a chance to express themselves. Hey, what are you wearing? That helps you to not feel that they are you. You need to ask that question. What are you wearing? What are they wearing? You don't need to know exactly where they're at, but where are they in time? So how old are they? You don't need to know exactly what happened to them. Your heart remembers all of that, not your brain.
Yes.
And you say, all right, what do you need right now? And they're going to vent. They're going to tell you about how they feel and where they're at. And this is the fun part then. You can say, good, I hear you. Let's go meet those needs. So would you like to actually go to your ballet recital? Let's do that. I'm going to take you. Let's go back in time and we're going to do the whole ballet recital from beginning to end. And you'll be able to celebrate with your friends and not worry about chicken pox. All right, the teenage version of me was harder because she just hated herself so much. She was quite happy to hang out in her little torture world. And so, I'd coax her out. Hey, what do you really want? You want to play music? Let's do that. You want to be an artist? Good. You want to be a scientist? We can do all of those. Let's combine them. How do we combine them? Let's get creative. Talk to me. I'm here for you because you can actually help them. They are not separate from you yet. They are in time. And so when you give them a chance to get their needs met, there's this feeling of refresh. There's this feeling of oneness. There's a feeling of light that opens up because suddenly now you don't have to carry around this deeply traumatized part of you in the basement who's doing their best yelling through the ducts of the house, hey, you're too ugly to be on an interview. Wow. You don't need to worry about them anymore because they get their needs met. And this is the power of thoughts. All you had to do in that moment, you don't have to ever say anything out loud. You're thinking your way through this. You're going to use your own brain mind to heal your traumatized selves. And the silence is glorious. And you make sure to ground and anchor it by meditating. And so that helps to make the body acclimatize to the new refreshed, more open, more clear, subconscious, and first attention. So that's what the tool is. It's very straightforward. I realized no one could help me and that I'd created this problem so that I could help myself and then teach other people how to do it too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, you talk about there being three minds. So you mentioned the brain mind, the heart mind, and then the gut mind. How do you work with the three minds to be able to heal trauma even more and erase some of our negative subconscious programming as you were just kind of, explaining there right now?
Yeah, so, you use your three minds all the time. It's more of a revelation of what we're doing already. We manifest with the three minds, we function, we love, we desire, we react with the three minds. The three minds is the body. And those that actually understood this were the Taoists. And so they called them the three Dantian centers. So you have your lower, your middle, and your upper Dantian centers. And they were the ones that kind of maintained that wisdom during the patriarchy, when the chakra system came in to save the day and help us function. But I don't really use that anymore. I use the three minds now. And it's a more full embodiment way of managing my energy. The heart itself is one of the most important parts of the three minds. And so we've discovered the brain mind, but the brain mind's not really good at things like memory, like we thought. It's good at logic, it's good at pros and cons, and it's good at transactions. And so we can depend on that brain mind for that. But the heart mind is the one who holds all your memory. And she or he is very good at helping you understand from your own experience. So when you are feeling hurt by a comment, it hits the heart first. Damn, you always feel it in the heart first, and then your brain reacts. Because that heart field is so big, it's connected to, of course, all of reality and the people and places and things around you. So that heart mind, though, it is reacting to it because it remembers being hurt by something like it before. When you actually can feel your way into the frequencies of emotion using the emotional body to look at your trauma and diligently recapitulate all of your trauma, then your heart's actually going to remember the relief of it. And when a comment like that comes later, you won't have a reaction at all. Because there's nothing left to hit. There's no trash bag for you to discover then. You already went through it. It has no power over you. And then the gut mind. The gut mind is probably my favorite because it's so weird. You're not talking to your intestines. You're talking to bacteria. The whole body's mainly made of bacteria. If you freeze dried one of us and we sift through it, most of it's not you. It's all these millions of bacteria. And that bacteria is deeply intelligent. It's been on this planet for a long time. And that bacteria created an agreement with the original embodiments that it would support the evolution of all these souls and be one with the human DNA embodiment. So what does the bacteria know? Well, I call them the emissaries of the earth, because they're telling you how to survive on this planet and how to thrive, but in harmony with the planet. We're so cut off from these other two brains that we don't know how to utilize them, even though they're talking to us all the time. So I like to teach people how to discern using your whole body, how to work with trauma and ego using your whole body, how to know what you need to do in each moment using your whole body. And so that gut mind, it's going to tell you some things that are really key about your survival. So let me give you an example. They don't always agree, by the way, as we know. We have adages like, my heart says one thing and my mind says another. Yes. Or I have a bad gut feeling about this.
Yeah.
And so people know they're using this, they just haven't had a chance to actually function with it fully. So I had this beautiful session with this young woman, and she's like, well, I just want to know if this particular guy is the right guy for me. And so in sessions, I don't just do readings. I actually train people to do their own seeing, to do their own understanding and their own discernment.
Yeah.
That way they don't need me. My job's to make sure they don't need me. And so I can see plenty, but that's not exactly what they need. They need to know how to do it without me, so they're not dependent upon me. And so that's a more empowerment paradigm attitude. So I said to her, all right, well, what's your brain say? And she's like, well, I have, mostly pros on my pro and con list. I'm like, great. So you get a good yes from your brain. What's your heart say? My heart just loves this guy. I have so much fun with him. Excellent. I said, what did your gut say? She's like, I'm really surprised, but it says no. And I said, okay, so let's discover that. What your gut is telling you how to survive and thrive on this planet in harmony with Earth. But why is it saying no exactly? And she said, well, I guess my gut isn't sure that this guy can help me survive. And I said, why? What happened that made you really understand that? And she said, I pay for everything. And I was like, oh, there you go. I said, so it's not over. Now you know what you need to know. You have the missing info. Your gut saying, I'm not so sure because I haven't seen proof that this guy's going to help me survive and thrive. So set him up for success. Say that. Tell him the truth. Say, I really love all these things. And the only thing that's really keeping me back and really making me resist diving in deeper is because of this, that you haven't paid for anything. See how he reacts when you ask him to pay for stuff, when you ask to split it, or when you ask him to pay for the whole date. See how he reacts, and then you'll know what you need to know.
Wow.
So that's part of how the three minds really function for you on your behalf all the time. And they don't stop functioning. They're constantly responding to reality. And once you start to feel it, you feel more in your body. You feel more complete. You don't feel just like a floating head all the time, dealing with your horrible, traumatized stuff and selves trying to tell you about how ugly you are and how you can't or can do something. So that's a huge relief for people, because then they feel like, wow, I can get way more answers from this embodiment than I ever thought. And that is empowering.
Yes. Yes. I mean, what I get there is kind of the harmony. You created a way for the three different brains to harmonize on a topic, on something that was really important to your client. And I totally get that. When you're you're in a state of confusion because you're being tugged in one direction and then being pulled in another. Now, earlier, Elizabeth, you mentioned like everything is consciousness. And I know when we had our prep call, one of the things that you said, we have our individuated consciousness, and then we also have the collective consciousness.
Yeah.
Can I get you to expand more on that for people who are, expand on that from a beginner's mindset, understanding our individuated consciousness and our collective consciousness?
Absolutely. So there's actually a body of scientific work, especially in astronomy and astrophysics, as well as quantum physics, that has a theory that everything is conscious. Well, anyone in mysticism already knows that. They already know that everything is conscious because everything's made of light. And light is full of information. It's full of consciousness. So they've really tried to systematically nail it down using a scientific concept to help us to understand that. But what is the implication of that?
Yeah.
And that's where we can lean on mysticism, which is spiritual science. And we already know the answer to that. So everything has layers and layers to it that create the whole of the universe. A person is like a layer of experience. A soul is a layer of experience. But just like the Earth has an electromagnetic field, which is measurable and is connected to and deeply influenced by the electromagnetic fields of all the planets and the sun around it, that too is exactly how the human race functions. So we can use the spheres of the solar system as a great example. Most people don't know that Jupiter is actually holding our whole solar system together, not the sun. Mm-hmm. Jupiter is holding it together because that electromagnetic field is so great. Well, if you were to imagine like the sun being part of an embodiment, that whole thing, there's nothing separate about it. All these gravitational fields and electromagnetic fields are functioning together as they're moving through space and creating different effects, because as they hit a new place in space-time, they hit new experiences. We ended up in a big, huge cloud of particles for a really long time, and we're now in a part of that cloud that is now bombarding us with a whole who knows amount of information and radiation and light that we never had access to before. Well, the human is the same. You're orbiting everyone else. You might think you're walking around, but your atoms are orbiting other atoms. Your embodiment and your experience is orbiting other embodiments and experiences. None of them are separate. They seem separate. That's the cool, amazing illusion that we get to break. It's called shattering an illusion. We even have an adage for that too. So with this understanding that everything's orbiting everything else, all the way out to the edge of the universe that's orbiting other universes, a multiverse, there's no difference in where you're at. You are a universe orbiting other universes. You'll never exactly know what it's like to be someone else, and we'll never exactly know what it's like to be in a different universe. But the orbits all inform each other. So this information is what we might call the field of consciousness. And this field of consciousness, as you can see, is so immense, it's mind-blowing, it's hard to wrap our heads around it. But we gotta make it practical. So many, many people can feel this. And I call them collective empaths. And collective empaths, they wake up crying and they're like, something terrible has happened on the planet and I have no idea what. And then they turn on the news and see that there was a crazy earthquake or something, or a tsunami. They're like, I could feel that. I could feel that when that happened. How is that possible? Well, you know now why it's possible. But that's how intimate and powerful that field is. Now, if a collective empath can be affected so dramatically by an event like that, how then are you affecting the rest of the collective? My friend, she's raising her son, and her son was asked at school what he wanted to be when he grew up. And I always say that's the worst thing to ask a kid, because suddenly you make them think about a future that they don't have any experience about. And now you've taken away their childhood and you've forced them to worry about the future. So I would say the best thing you can ask is, what do you love right now? And how will it affect the world? Because then they can stay present and they can discover themselves and their essence and what that essence desires. But then they also think about the bigger picture in the now, not the future. How does it affect the world when you love something? So then they've got that in their attention and they're going to consider that. So I think it's really key to understand these things, but not to let it overwhelm you, which is hard to do once you begin to feel and see and know this stuff. And you sit back into it. You got to relax into this. There's a trust that comes into knowing and experiencing these things. And I like to tell people, you know, enlightenment is a wonderful goal. Enlightenment is unbounded awareness. It doesn't mean no ego, by the way. It just means unbounded awareness. And you don't reach enlightenment by marching yourself into it. You lay back into it. You lay back into it and you become one with it because you trust it. And you have to learn how to trust it. You have to learn how to trust that light and the field and the collective. And you have to learn how to trust what we've created as creator beings being created at the same time. And trusting the universe, trusting the source field and how intelligent it is, how far beyond just humanity it is. And this has great implications ultimately for our place as a race in this galaxy with many other races involved in our lives all the time, and us not stepping up to be the creator beings we are so that we can interact at a galactic level and take our position at that table as equals. By understanding this field of consciousness, we'll be able to do that. And it starts with each of us as individuals.
Yes.
Well, I have a question that comes to mind, and I'm excited to ask. You have experienced moving between the dimensions, third dimension, fourth dimension, fifth dimension. It goes on up, right? Can you talk to us about that? I'd love to talk about, like what we're seeing in the world now. And so many people kind of stuck in this fear paradigm.
Yeah.
And how we can shift, how we can help others shift and shift ourselves.
Absolutely. So the first misnomer is that we shift from one to another.
Mm-hmm.
The second is that some of them are more valuable than others. That's not true. And the third is that we ought to hang out in the highest dimension and then just stay there. And that's no fun. That's not the job. If that was the job, then you just disappear. But that's not the job. So let me describe the dimensions.
Yeah.
The first and second are as glorious as the third and fourth, and they're as glorious as the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, and all the way to the 12th. Traditionally, in mysticism, there's 12 dimensions. Mm-hmm. They're not higher than each other. They're closer to source. And the first dimension is actually as close to source as the 12th because it's circular. It's all like a big room. It's a big, huge room that seems separate from each other, but the only thing separating them is formlessness and timelessness. So some dimensions, they don't have as much time there, so things go by a lot slower. In others, there's less form, so there's more access to the light, the original still light of consciousness. And the idea is then, if you move the trash bags out of the way, that's all you have to do. The trash bags of trauma and the trash bags of ego, if you move them out of the way, you actually can experience all of them at once. Wow. The hard part is the burning away of those structures. Everything becomes more and more formless, and your brain totally catches up to it. But your brain's not the one that's going to get you there. It's the heart. The heart gets you there. And that's the difference to where we're at now. People are realizing that they have much more than their brain, and that the brain mind can't get them where they really want to be. They're not happy. And then they realize that the heart is doing something. It's pulling things towards us. It's pushing things away. And we begin to feel into the heart. So when we say heart-centered marketing or heart-centered business, heart-centered relationships, heart-centered parenting, these are things people have been talking about for 30 years? And now it's really coming online in that it's so permeated consciousness that people now very subconsciously are beginning to function more from a heart-based consciousness. Mm-hmm. And that's going to lead them to wanting to be able to access much more than just the 3D. Now, the moving of judgment away from dimensions is very key, because a lot of folks have been taught that we're going to be moving from the third dimension to the fifth dimension. Mm-hmm. We're not moving anywhere.
It's already here, right?
It's already been here. The dimensions didn't go anywhere. Mathematically, they definitely didn't go anywhere. You're just getting access to what this human body is capable of. And that's the cool part. That's why anthropology will still be valuable when we move more and more into a mystical science like mysticism. It's still valuable to understand what the human attributes are and how historically we ended up in the position we're at.
Yeah.
And so that includes a galactic history that's totally suppressed. And it's very important for people to discover that. So that's how I envision and understand dimensions, and that it's sort of like a beautiful library of consciousness. And when you hang out in the 11th dimension, you can see this. So I'm going to give you an access point already to it. The 11th dimension is where the library is. And the library is circular. And on one part of the library, on one side of it, there's peak separation experiences. Experiences that make you feel separate from everything else and separate from consciousness. We've got grief and slavery and rape and you name it over there. On the other side of the library is peak oneness experiences. And that's all these blissful, ecstatic states of oneness and completion and joy. And then everything in between, including the mundane, is stored in this library. But what is it really? It's frequencies, all of it. Grief is a frequency. Slavery is a frequency. War is a frequency. Joy is a frequency. Being bored is a frequency. So then what is the library made of? The library is love. There is no opposite to love. Love contains all of the frequencies. And if you're willing to stand in the middle and be willing to stand in a frequency or not, very systematically, and say, okay, my ancestors faced slavery. I know there's trash bags of slavery written in my DNA, in my temple of light. There's these trash bags. I need to go stand in this frequency so fully and welcome it so fully with love that it won't have power over me anymore and it will burn away those trash bags. This is very hard, but it's even harder to go and remove your attachments to all the blissful, fun states of consciousness, all the joy. Can you let go of wanting to feel joy all the time? If you're willing, then there's no frequency that you don't have access to consciously. Somebody comes up and says some horrible racist comment to you, perhaps. Can you still fully see and love them in that moment? Because if you burn those slavery trash bags out of the way, the racism trash bags, then you won't find yourself in reaction. And it's extremely disarming when someone tries to play the whole trauma ping pong game of victim tyrant with you, especially around racism, and you don't play. Instead, you stand back and you look at that whole board and you look at the ping pong ball and the person who wants to play this tyrant ping pong game with you, and you say, there's only love here. That's all I've got. It's extremely disarming. It ends most problems when you can be in the full 100% consciousness of your soul. That's what's accessible in the dimensions, are these kinds of concepts. That's what you make room for, and what you'll remember and what you know already when you choose to deal with those trash bags.
Yeah.
That brings to mind something, Elizabeth, like it takes so much energy, like you're saying, to even move, sometimes to just like ping pong that ball, to play that game, like when you're actually giving into the ego and identifying with victimization and identifying with the other side of it. Any identification, it's like there's an attachment, right? So what a powerful kind of center, what do they call it, the Tao, right? Centerpiece to have, to just be able to share and expand the heart space to all of that.
It's very still. Yeah, it's very, very still. It's stillness that is so mind-blowing that it almost hurts. And it hurts because ego and trauma vibrate, and they don't want to be still. They need to be understood. They need to be fully known, right? And we carry these books around from the library, like this book of self-hatred, or this book of arrogance, this book of physical pain. These are things I'm discovering. And if I really want to, I can be finished reading the book. And you can put all your effort in that instead. But I think too, the other piece is, here's another tool. When you are like having something really dramatic happen and you're like, holy cow, I'm getting sucked into the trauma ego ping pong, zoom out. Your consciousness doesn't need to leak its energy into the future or past, but it does need to be able to move around. And so I say, well, don't move into the future or past where you can't do anything. Stay in the now where all the power and the action is, and zoom in and out. Zoom into something. This is how you use your psychic ability, which is basically your imagination, by the way. You can imagine zooming into a pain point in your body. So maybe you've got a painful jaw right now. If you zoom in and you imagine yourself very small, it's not so hard to do that. And you go in and you look at it. What do you see? Don't try to control it. There's information in the pain. You might find that it's actually a lot lighter and brighter than you thought it was. Or you maybe see some dark density there. Go into it. Nothing can hurt you. Nothing can hurt you. Even if your body dies, nothing can hurt you. Your soul goes home to source then, where it was always anyway. And the other thing is, zoom out, look above the situation. So here you've maybe got somebody in front of you and they're egging you on. Zoom out and say, all right, what's really going on here? And I'll give you a clue about what's really happening so you can look for yourself. You are a soul and so are they. What is it that they're viewing you through? Trash bags. They're viewing you through boxes of trauma and trash.
Their own trash bags.
Compassion. Then you have compassion for the tyrant of all things. And you say, well, I can really see it now. That's why they were bringing up these words, because they wanted, that trauma wants to be acknowledged. And so then you can see your soul, who might also have trash bags and things, but you're in charge. So you don't have to view through that. You can view above the whole thing and say, actually, I hear what you're saying. You must feel very scared of people who look different than you. What happened to you? Something very bad must have happened. Tell me about it. I'm here for you. Whoa, you just switched up the whole victim thing right then and there. You are not a victim. You never had to be. Instead, you're actually in sovereign service to another soul who tried to co-create something tragic, but you are reminding them of who they are and that their experience, no matter how bigoted and terrible they might be, no matter how awful that they are, that their experience is incredibly important. Being willing to hear it, being willing to let them lay it out for you, no matter how angry or violent or vicious they want to be. There's no more war when you come at it from that direction and when you choose to see it from that vantage point.
That is beyond words. Beyond words.
I love that. That's beautiful.
That's a mic drop.
Yeah, that's a mic drop. A mic drop. Perfectly said, Shawnee. I love that. I love that you're ending you're ending our session with compassion and like love. Like look at call forth your lens of compassion, your lens of love, and start helping strip away not just your trash bags, but others' trash bags. And
absolutely.
Be a beacon of light for them.
And helping them to value those trash bags, because most people don't. How can they? They want to get rid of their trauma. And they try to throw the trash bag out by doing whatever, clearing, praying, a lot of beautiful ancient ways that got us through to this moment. But if you really don't want those trash bags to come back, you need to know them. You need to understand them. And there's no single human being that is evil enough to elicit any response from me, at least, other than that love and compassion. And there is no judgment here. There's no judgment left, because that's not what I see. I see a soul. I see the light of source, and that light is me. It's not different from me.
Amen.
Beautiful.
So good.
It's what we can all do. It's totally plausible.
Yeah, you explain it so well. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's because I love it so much.
Yeah, I can tell. You can
Yes.
tell. Oh, beautiful.
Wow.
Well, Elizabeth, where can people find you online and, you know, learn more about your work?
Excellent. So my website is seer, S-E-E-R, and scientist.com. And my YouTube is actually a great way to come and learn from all of this and others, because I've interviewed masterful, awakened, and enlightened people. But I have a lot of free videos and interviews and things up there too. And that's, if you just type in Elizabeth Wood, Seer and Scientist, you'll see that. But that's a great place to start digging into information like this for free right away, and sign up and subscribe, but also come join me for my monthly call that I'm due every month. I just did one, and we do a lot of work together. We dig into the hottest topics, and we take it from the personal to the universal. But we also build a pillar of light every month. And that's a wonderful way to transmit some of our intentions beyond the self through the power of your soul. And it's something, once you do it, then you can do it for anything you want to. It's a powerful, wonderful way to use these abilities in the dimensions and to discover how wonderful you are and how powerful you are, even if you're sick in bed, even if you're in your PJs on the couch and are like, I'm not moving today. You can still be anywhere in the universe, my friends. You don't have to just get your body to the edge of the planet and beyond. You can do it with your mind. And that's the glory of the third eye and the whole body and what your soul is capable of.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. It has been such a blessing and such an honor and such a privilege to be able to have you and
Thank
share,
you.
oh my gosh, share your beautiful, loving, compassionate, very galactic and very real insights with our audience. So thank you. Thank you for being an illumination of light on all of us and our planet.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you for your powerful container and your beautiful hearts. Thank you so much.
And we are so excited to have you for on our next live stream. Yes, you will be with us, and we are so excited. It's
We're gonna have so much fun.
Yes,
It's on January 21st and 22nd. Yeah.
January 21st and 22nd, and we'll be doing it at the same time, right, ladies? It's 9 a.m. PST. We're starting, going, and we're going to have magnificent speakers, and Elizabeth's going to be there with us, and we are just so honored to have her there. And thank you so much, Elizabeth, for this.
I can't wait. We'll see you again. Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Have a beautiful, magical day.